Bitcoin has created the most amount of millionaires ever in history.
The rise in Bitcoin recently helped create another 70,000 crypto millionaires. That's just over the past year. There are now 240,000 people with crypto holdings worth $1 million or more. That's according to a new report from Henley & Partners and New World Wealth.
On the 3rd of January 2009, the first Bitcoin was mined. Finally, the math worked out. The chain held. The code actually worked. For the first time in history, money could move between two people anywhere in the world without a government, without a bank, without permission. Satoshi Nakamoto had built what he called a peer-to-peer electronic cash system. Yes, he used the word cash specifically for a reason. Now, how Bitcoin would work, it would be a public ledger, meaning if you were to go and buy coffee at your favorite coffee shop, you would pay using your wallet address, and anyone could track your wallet address to see where you got the money from, who you've sent money to, how much is in your savings. It was like a public wallet that would act as an Instagram feed, that every single transaction would be connected to the other, and anyone can watch and see and know everything about your financial records just by knowing your wallet address. Most importantly, AI could do this within seconds. Now that you've understood that, you then see the problem that Satoshi had with his own creation. Satoshi had a big interest in fixing this problem that anyone could see how much money you have, rob you, abuse you, or manipulate you. He called this problem the problem of Bitcoin. He said, if a solution was found, a much better, easier, more convenient Bitcoin would be possible. Now, this is the creator of Bitcoin. He wanted to solve his invention. The problem was double spend check. To stop someone spending the same coin twice, the network needs to be able to see every transaction. So privacy, by definition, would hide these transactions. So these two ideas pulled in opposite directions, and Satoshi wanted to solve this issue, that every single bank transaction being transparent as an Instagram feed on this blockchain, every swipe made it almost impossible to try and keep things private, especially in the age of AI. However, by keeping the blockchain public, it actually ensured that nobody would spend the same money twice. Because if we did not know where each transaction is verified to be real, then people could manipulate the system and spend the same money twice. This was a big wall for Satoshi. Public feed means no privacy. But if you make it private, it means no one's going to trust it. To prove that money was real, the network had to see every transaction. To give people privacy, the network had to hide every transaction. How do you even begin to solve this mammoth of a mathematical problem? Now, Satoshi posted his last message ever to the whole world. This was his final word. There's more work to do on DOS, but I'm doing a quick build of what I have so far in case it's needed. But I'm going to venture into more complex ideas. Satoshi was referring to the very problem that we have today, that if people are able to trace your finances, this is an attack. This is an infringement on your privacy. Governments could use this loophole to tax people, to confiscate funds. They would know everything about everyone. And think about it. If you have a political opponent and you're raising funds to campaign against them, if they know every single funding mechanism you're using and where your money is, they could stop you. They could literally eliminate you. This was the problem of Bitcoin. It sat unsolved for many years. Satoshi himself said, I'm going to be solving this complex idea. How do I ensure that people are able to transact publicly on a blockchain to trust one another, but also privately, but ensuring that the blockchain is still a record of truth? It was a problem that mathematicians of old had sat down for 50 years trying to solve. Mathematicians gave up their professions. They gave up their time to sit down and try and solve this mathematical equation. How do you make a transaction private as well as public at the same time? Years later, cryptographers solved that problem. And now we have a cryptocurrency known as Zcash. However, it forked. It became even better in a cryptocurrency known as Ycash. And in the next few minutes, I'm going to tell you exactly why Ycash exists. I'll also let you know why almost no one is talking about it and why you are first at understanding what happened. Let's go back to the problem that Satoshi Nakamoto had. He said if a solution was found, a much better, easier, more convenient implementation of Bitcoin would be possible. That was his last will and testament on the privacy problem. He had stated the challenge. He had said what the prize would be. He had said the tools of his time were not enough. And then, 4 months later, he was gone. Now, a lot of you might think cryptocurrency was just started back then. It goes back hundreds of years. Cypherpunks, cryptographers, academics, men and women that believed with a conviction that financial privacy was a fundamental human right. They defended it, they built it, they spent their lives behind closed doors programming so that we may enjoy blockchain technology today. Satoshi wasn't the only one. There were many who tried to solve this problem. Part of those is a man that many claim could be Satoshi Nakamoto. He said in 1993, if you see a proposal of an electronic money system, check to see whether it has the ability to preserve the privacy of transactions the way paper money does it today. If not, realize the proposal is designed to harm, not help individual privacy. That was Finney, who had the closest public known idea, closest to Bitcoin, who many suspect could be Satoshi Nakamoto. There was also Sassaman, who studied for years under David, a father of cryptography, and had advocated for cryptography for years. These two were those that many have accused of being Satoshi Nakamoto. Sassaman, at the age of 30, it is written that he committed suicide, which I do not believe. They came for him. Finney had ALS, a disease that literally left him in a condition that he had to be supported. And in one of the nights where he could no longer assist himself to walk, there were people that kept terrorizing his family, asking for the billions in Bitcoin because they knew that Satoshi had kept those Bitcoins a secret. So many of them had tried. Adam Black, Wei Dai, Nick Szabo, Gregory Maxwell, the cryptographers that even built Monero, each working in their own way on a piece of the same unfinished puzzle that Satoshi had left behind. There was a breakthrough, a mathematical breakthrough that would finish what Satoshi Nakamoto had started. This did not come in a forum or a startup. This came in academia. A quarter of a century earlier, in the 1900s, 3 cryptographers had laid the foundation. Shafi, Silvio, and Charles. They published the paper that introduced zero knowledge proofs to the world. The mathematics was beautiful. It was also too slow, too theoretical, too complex to be of any practical use. So for nearly 30 years, it just sat in academic journals. Many people missed it. And in 2012, the same year that Shafi was awarded what is known as a Nobel Peace Prize of Science, some group of cryptographers went back in those journals and reread and understood that therein might be a solution for what Satoshi wanted to solve. This was a new generation of cryptographers. They picked up the foundation that had been laid by the great Sir Bansky, Ran, Alexandra, Aaron. They formalized what they called ZK-Snarks. And for the first time, a cryptographic proof could be small enough, fast enough to live on a real network. It was the bridge Satoshi was trying to figure out. 1 year later, in 2013, a team at Johns Hopkins University, Ian, Christina, Matthew, Aviel, they published the first paper that proposed taking these new tools and using them to give Bitcoin the privacy that Satoshi had imagined. They called it Zero Coin. It worked in theory, but it was too slow to ship to the world. 1 year after that, in 2014, the same team, knowing those that had gone before them to wage a war for human rights, they expanded. They brought in experts, Eli, Aaron, Mards, Alexandra. They solved the speed problem. They called it, this new paper, Zcash. Yes, they had done it 6 milliseconds. The challenge Satoshi wanted to see met had been met. The vision Hal Finney had given up his whole life, given us instructions to say that if you see a solution for digital cash and it doesn't have this privacy element, know that it is not the correct one. Keep going until you win this war. The mission was accomplished. They had done it. However, it was not complete. The journey had to continue. How do we put this new piece of code onto Bitcoin? And when they got to Bitcoin, they found that in 2015, there were too many arguments about changing Bitcoin's code, about analyzing what to do with Bitcoin. They found that Bitcoin had been invaded by political squabbles. So they forged ahead and said, we'll take the code of Bitcoin. Now think about it. Your grandmother preparing her favorite recipe. If you could take that recipe and take it home with you, but add in an extra ingredient, that would make that recipe still your grandmother's recipe, but with an extra layer of improvement. That is exactly what happened. They built Zcash, still the same Bitcoin with an extra layer. The problem that had been solved, privacy. This beautiful technology, it proved the beauty of mathematics. It proved the thing that Satoshi had always wanted to prove. The mathematics that shows you that you could buy your coffee in public, but yet that transaction could be private. The same way that your cash works today. The man that brought this all together was Zuko Wilcox. He brought in the years of academic struggle. He brought in the years of coding that giants like Hal Finney, Satoshi Nakamoto had created in Bitcoin. He assembled a team known as Electric Coin Company, and they set forth to build this mathematical ingenuity, Zcash. However, in building it, they changed one of the principles that I believe Satoshi would not be proud of. They entered in an extra piece of code to say that 20% of the fees of them that use this blockchain would come back to them as a company, as a group, to be able to grow this cryptocurrency and for them to pay salaries and make money from it. This was somewhat of a mistake, I believe. And when the time came for this foundation to be created that would then control this 20% stake of every transaction that is now created utilizing Zcash, a man, a programmer from Stanford University, raised up his hand and said, I want to run to be the leader of this very foundation that would control 20% of all the transaction fees that would run on this new created blockchain. But he had one mission in mind. He wanted to cancel it. He wanted to bring back this creation to the fundamentals that Satoshi Nakamoto had created it on, that no one should ever take transaction fees the same way that banks have done for many years, and that has created an environment where they know transactions happening from everyone, manipulate, abuse people because of this. This man, unfortunately, lost the vote to become the chairman of this foundation. And Zuko Wilcox, he continued as the chairman. But what this man remembered is that this code, this new cryptocurrency Zcash, was created as a fork of Bitcoin. It's the same recipe with an extra layer of privacy, but an extra layer that dictates that 20% should be given to those that worked on the project forever. This man did what many a selfless man would do, what many a Satoshi Nakamoto would do. Howard took the code and removed the 20% cut that they wanted to keep for themselves as programmers and as a company. And he kept the code and preserved it in what is known as Ycash. Ycash became that code that was exactly what Satoshi Nakamoto intended, with a layer of privacy that allowed transactions to both be private and public, whether you could choose whether you wanted to use the private address or the public address. Many hated him because they felt that he had taken food out of their mouths. And they vowed to say, your coin will never amount to anything, and our coin will rise because we will receive 20% of each of the transaction fees, of which they did. And as they began to receive this 20% of transaction fees, they went out and they started to market and get everybody to know about Zcash. The same Zcash that functions exactly like Ycash. And Howard, because he did not have this 20% archive, this 20% that he could receive of every transaction, he kept on building upon the principles of Satoshi Nakamoto. And the time came when they went out and got VCs and got funding, and we all saw a world where Zcash skyrocketed to over $700, whereas Ycash remained unknown. And in one of the conversations that I was having with somebody about Zcash, he mentioned the name Ycash. And I quickly went onto Google and I said, what is this Ycash? And there he was, Howard, a humble computer science graduate from Stanford University who also studied law, who understood and preserved what Satoshi had created as a legal document and as a code that human beings could not come back and try and manipulate anybody to get fees or any other thing from. I reached out to him and I said, why have you been quiet? And he said, I haven't been quiet. I've been talking to the few that remained with me. But majority of those that I started with, they were enjoying the profits that came with Zcash. Upon finding him, for me, it was a true moment of peace, knowing that what Finney died for could be preserved. There came a time where Finney could no longer speak, and men, reporters, people would constantly abuse him, trying to extort Bitcoin from him. Not a day did he give up. Finney coded till his very last breath. Satoshi gave us Bitcoin, yet gave away over $1 billion to rescue and help humanity. Professors People who saw that human beings need a way to transact without the control of wicked governments had sacrificed everything to keep the code base pure. There he was, Howard, tired, running the project on his own, using every bit of money he had to keep it running. And when I met him, I knew that I could not be quiet. I knew that I could not let the dream that Satoshi Nakamoto, that Finney, that many of the world's best mathematicians who loved that humanity would be able to be free like myself, I knew I could not be quiet. I knew I had to let the truth be known. Today, when you talk about Zcash, many are proud because 20% of all transaction fees will always be given back to that team that would use that money to market, to paste it on Cybertrucks, to host conferences, to do whatever they wish to do. However, they broke the principles that Satoshi Nakamoto created. Satoshi Nakamoto put over 1 million Bitcoins away that he never touched till date. A man who sacrificed everything, knowing very well that he could take them and be the world's most important, the world's most richest, and the world's most honored human being on earth. But he decided to live a life of sacrifice. That a young man like Sassaman, who I believe was not suicidal at all, but many say he committed suicide, who gave up his life, who studied privacy for years to get to this conclusion, that these men that sacrificed everything so that you and I could enjoy privacy, could transact without human beings tracking us, without human beings charging us an extra fee, without being discriminated. Fathers like Phil Zimmerman, who took his time to groom and mentor them in pretty good privacy, a project that took the United States government to order when they tried to kill people using nuclear weapons. A man who governments tried to take to court and arrest because of the very technology that has created many millionaires today. That this lineage would not be tainted. So I put it to you, we have Bitcoin, which was not a finished work, which Finney, a man who I believe could be Satoshi Nakamoto, said be careful of this system that would come and would cause governments to be able to track you. Today we know that governments are using this information on the blockchain to track and understand every single transaction that you've ever done, and should you ever raise your voice to try and object or say anything, they will arrest you for tax evadance, they will arrest you for using your money, they will arrest you for using technology, and no lawyer will be able to assist you because the blockchain is public and it's public forever. When Satoshi saw this, his last message was, I'm going to leave Bitcoin and I'm going to work on something more complex. What else could it be that he was working on that was more complex than Bitcoin? Everybody was praising Bitcoin, but his last message to the world was that I'm going to stop working on this and focus on more complex matters. What could those complex matters be other than fighting for the ultimate privacy of men and women? The academics that came up with the ZK-Snarks technology, they were not paid. They didn't ask for 20%. The Finneys of this world, they didn't ask for 20%. They gave up their lives so that everyone could be free of the clutches of globalists that try and constrain men and women to political systems, to governmental systems that have never made sense, that are built on lies, abuse, and tricks of the highest order. These were men who gave up everything to ensure that this code lands on our shore. Young men and women that gathered in rooms where there was no funding, where there was no Lamborghini. Men and women who sat down with computers, ones and zeros for hours, literally developing code that would ensure that you and I today are able to enjoy this technology for free. When I discovered Ycash, I knew that it was time for my legacy to begin. As one of the first people in Africa to write a book on Bitcoin, and I've taught many people on Bitcoin, I knew that I could not be quiet, having known the truth, having met people who I believe were Satoshi Nakamoto, having sat at the same table as them, having breathed the same oxygen as men who gave up everything for a truth that did not benefit them at all. I knew I could not be quiet. It would have been easy for me to join the gravy train of Zcash and make a lot of money. But I chose to follow the fathers of this very revolution that fought for the rights of every human being, privacy. In hindsight, Satoshi, thank you that the work was not finished, because we were able to see those that ran to Bitcoin and turned it into something of governments, turned it into something of banks, turned it into something that went back into the same powers that Satoshi Nakamoto was fighting. Satoshi created Bitcoin to stand up against the banks in 2008 when we had the financial crisis. How dare we have men today that give it back to the same banks that manipulate and liquidate a whole generation? How dare we want to celebrate something that is in the hands of those very same people we try to get it out of? Privacy. That's where the fight started. When Sassaman gathered all of them, when Sassaman mentored these young men and women who had a dream. You know, it came to a time where Finney said, I will go for a year without being paid a salary, just so this code can live. People called him. People have tracked his patterns. The man worked every single day for over 12 hours on this very code without ever leaving his chair, so that you and I may have this code transform nations and transform many people. There comes a time in every cyberpunk's life, me being one of them, that we must stand for the very truth that men like Sassaman, men like Finney, men that came before us stood for the truth. Privacy is a human right. Privacy can never be replaced. Privacy must be fought. Privacy must be given to every single human being. And to me, there is no better solution. There is no better instrument. There is no better tool than Ycash. And to those that ask, why is Ycash only listed on a certain number of exchanges? Why can't I find it on the big exchanges? I might ask you and say they said the same thing to Satoshi Nakamoto when he was building Bitcoin. They said, if this thing was so amazing, why did the banks not pay people to build it? Why did the governments not pay people to build it? Because they were never for privacy. Because they never cared for privacy. It is only those that understood privacy, that fought for privacy before it became popular, that stood up for it. So yes, as we stand, it's not available on all these cryptocurrency exchanges, but it is available in some of them. And one of the most damning things you must know about this industry is that many of these cryptocurrency industries, many of these cryptocurrency exchanges continually raise so much funds through listing useless tokens that go out there and scam people, through listing pump and dump tokens that go out there and scam people. And me being involved and having understood what the Ycash team told me, that when they reached out to exchanges, they were told to pay millions of dollars or else they'll never see their project come to light. Yes, Zcash was able to pay them because they charge you 20% every single time you use their blockchain. But the real truth, Bitcoin, the way it started with Satoshi Nakamoto, rejected. When we started it, you had to go on a local Bitcoin. You had to talk to people to get it. That must suffer to be put on public blockchains. Well, to hell with it. We will find it wherever we need to find it, standing up for the truth that they died for. We will look for it on every platform, for we know it is a code of the truth. It is the only shield that we have against globalists and these people that try and destroy the world as we see it. And to these cryptocurrency exchanges that have forgotten the principles that this very industry was created on, that continually gloat in how much profits they make from liquidating young people and causing them to cause leverage trades that turn them into gamblers. To these people that are trying to turn this industry of privacy into some your days are numbered. For there is an army of cryptographers who stand for the truth, who will not watch the inventions of old be turned into something of a casino. We will stand up for the truth. The blockchain was never created so that people can gamble and risk and lose it all. It was created as a freedom mechanism to ensure that men and women who are wicked and unruly never have their power over what human beings call peace today. It started off as a liberation movement. Not a liberation movement with a president that could be manipulated or bribed. A liberation movement of men and women who used code to fight the system that be. A men and women in San Francisco who sacrificed everything in small rooms. Mathematicians who spent over 50 years trying to understand how do we create shielded transactions and at the same time public transactions. It began in the basements and it grew and took over the world. And today I send forth this very same warning to the cryptocurrency industry. You watch Ycash grow, the grassroots of where it will go to, and it will take over the world. For there's one thing you can never take away, one thing that it has that nobody else has. It has got the white papers that were created by many men and women who sacrificed hundreds of years understanding mathematical equations that brought about the freedom that we have. It has the code that was written by men and women who sacrificed everything, money, status, their family members, coding to ensure that it worked. It has the purity of the cypherpunks. And if you're a cypherpunk out there, I'm calling forth and reaching out to you to say your vision is not lost in this generation. If there's one person, count on me. I will not stop letting the message of the truth of why the technology was created. I will not stop propagating it in every hall, in every place, everywhere I go, letting people know the truth that cryptocurrencies were not created as a fun thing that people can use. They were not created as a tool to entertain. They were not created as a gambling mechanism. They were not created for fun. They were created for the privacy of human rights. They were created as a liberation tool to stop those that imagined vain and wicked and unruly ways of controlling the world. We've just come out of COVID, a world where everybody was forced to take the jab. Let's take another world. What if a new ruler could come up and force everybody to take a jab, force everybody to take a mark, force everybody to do something, and they could stand up there and say, if you don't do it, you will not be able to buy bread, you will not be able to transact, you will not be able to use money. What then will the world be able to use? How then will those that refuse to take the COVID vaccine, how will they continue to function? Because we spoke about this during the COVID pandemic, that those that are saying that people who did not take the vaccine will not get hired, how are they expecting those people to survive without them subjecting themselves to the jab? What if that was a practice round for those that have wicked and vain thoughts of controlling the world? What if they come back with something even more lethal and force us to say, if you do not take this, you will not be able to transact? What shield will we have then? It is only through the shielded pool, shielded transactions, that men and women died. Well, Hal Finney's condition worsened. The story of the police swamping his home because a prankster had called to try and frustrate him, to get him to give up on this project. And everybody in his home had to get out because the SWAT team and every single instrument of the police of that day and age was in his home, thinking that he's a terrorist. And he was brought out onto the lawn naked as a man who could not do anything. But yet every single day woke up and coded. Woke up and warned us to say, if one day they show you something shiny and they say that this is digital cash and you have one way to know whether it's real. He said, does it have the privacy that paper money has? If it doesn't, know that it is not the solution. I, for one, am grateful that Bitcoin came. Bitcoin did what it needed to do. It allowed us to prove to the world that an alternative financial world could be built. I am, however, aware that through AI and the way the governments are going, that from what was supposed to be an instrument of great liberation and peace, they have turned it into a surveillance system because the blockchain is public. I'm grateful that men like Howard stood firm when Zcash was created as a solution to take 20% of every single transaction, not 5, not 10, 20. They stood firm and said no, with no funding, the same principles that Hal died for, no salary. In fact, when I spoke to Howard, he said, I've never touched a single one of the coins that have been donated towards the foundation. Everything you see today on Ycash, they built it as a collective of coders that are still living and working under the same spirit, the same power, the same vigor that they did back then. Let's be honest, greed, manipulation has turned many of the projects that we have today in cryptocurrency to become useless, and many a headache in today's society. When I found this pure team that refused to pay for listings. So if you don't see them on any cryptocurrency exchange, it's because they refuse to pay to be there. They refuse to be used as an instrument of making profits for globalists. And for those exchanges that have listed them, Bitmart, non-KYC, it also happens to be on the Binance Smart Chain, and many other exchanges that have reached out, that we've spoken to about this project that said, had we known, we would have listed this earlier. I want to thank you. And for all the cryptographers out there, our work has just begun. Where we thought Bitcoin was the revolution, that was the precursor. Now we have a real revolution. A public blockchain, a shielded pool, and a diversified pool. Welcome to the world where privacy will always reign supreme. No government, no financial institution, no billionaire, no biggest, no political party can stop this revolution. We stand on the shoulders of giants who sacrificed everything for us to get here. Technology reigns supreme and frees men from the clutches of a wicked and unruly man. It would be a disservice for me not to end off this video by thanking every one of the families that allowed us to benefit from the sacrifices that their family members took. Finney's wife watched a man who sacrificed his whole life working on a new world. Children did not get enough time to spend with their fathers. Mathematicians who spent countless nights cracking their heads trying to solve these equations. Those they called loved ones, they may never have truly understood your sacrifice. But today I want to thank each and every one of you. Although I can't mention you by name, but I want to thank each and every one of you for sharing those very special people in your lives with us as humanity. We are forever grateful.